agree. I think the greatest weakness was just they couldn't figure out who to focus on. It was a lack of focus at the character level. Like they nailed the story. The story was great. It was compelling. It kept you interested. Events moved along. They really pushed the story. But when it came to just developing the characters in the sense of who should we care about and who shouldn't we really care about, you got a mixed bag.
Hello there and welcome. Today we are reviewing Season 1 of The Wheel of Time, a show that we watched every episode of and reviewed every single one on YouTube. But today we're giving our full perspective on the entire season now that the first season is over. My name is Cody. Across the internet from me is my great friend and co-reviewer, Zach. Zach, I want you to start us off by just saying general impressions. Good, bad, meh. What do you think of the first season of Wheel of Time?
For what Amazon was trying to do with their flagship high fantasy series, I thought it was pretty good, man. I thought it was pretty good. Obviously, there's room for improvements. We'll talk about those. But I think for the project they decided to take on, which is an enormous project, I think they did pretty good with what they had. They lost their way a little bit there in the middle of it, but I think overall, I think this was a great first season to a very long story. So I think, yeah, Amazon, for what they had and have to work with, this was a pretty solid introductory series.
I agree with you. I thought that the show was pretty good. I thought that it had more episodes that I liked than I didn't. There were a couple that I would consider average. There was one that I just really didn't like. However, this is a show that's tough to judge because it is dealing with the mountain of expectations that are going to be thrust upon it by really longtime fans. And while some people might come from it of the angle of, well, that's not necessarily fair, you have to judge the show on its own merits, I don't know. I think it is kind of fair because the show doesn't exist without the millions of people who bought the books. And I feel like there's a good portion of people who watch this show who do feel let down by what they saw on screen in the first season. And our whole approach to this has always been to be fair. And so everything that we're saying is trying to be as fair as possible to the show. I do think that there's issues, and I do think there was good things. I think, though, even if you didn't love the first season, I think they can improve and learn from feedback going into season 2. What's something you thought was a huge strength that this show was able to accomplish that most shows don't do a great job of?
I'm going to say the fact that you are able to cover so much ground. Okay. For those that read the first book and they know how long the story is. I actually have a friend right now who's currently reading the book for the first time, and he gives me kind of updates throughout the week of where he's at. And I forgot just how much is in the book. I mean, there's so much to get through. And so for just book one of a very long series, I gotta say they did a really good job of covering the major points, of picking out the important characters, the important events, and doing a really good job of getting us excited about the world. The world building was awesome. I guess that kind of tailors in a little bit with the ground that they covered, because with that ground, you got to cover a lot of the world. And I found myself honestly really excited about the different factions and the locations and the people groups within this world. It makes you very interested, and you got this feeling that there's some depth here, man.
Yeah.
There's some deep characters. There's some people groups that really have a history within this land. And so for me, it was a combination of just the scope of the ground that they had to cover, coupled with the world building as a whole. I thought they did a great job with the world building that shows, honestly, either they nail it or they completely miss it and it ends up just kind of, I mean, Star Wars is kind of an example with the first one. The space is kind of a backdrop to just the story that's being told, where this one I felt like the world was very much a part of these characters' story. And so for me, yeah, those were two very strong things that I think this show did really well.
Yeah. I think that the world building was good. One of the things that sticks out to me that's the big thing is I felt like with the performances of the characters that they were all believable characters and they all felt grounded within the world that the show built. And one show I'm going to compare it to is The Witcher, for example. The Witcher has some pretty good characters, but it also has a very frustrating character in there, Jaskier, who just kind of sticks out like a sore thumb. You're never really excited when he's on screen, and you don't like him for like show reasons. You just don't like him because you just wish he wasn't there. And I have to be honest, I don't really think there were too many characters where I ever felt that with in Wheel of Time, even including side characters outside of our suicidal warder. I wasn't a fan of that for mainly just it felt like a weird deviant. But I do feel like even though the arcs and the storytelling I thought could be better, I really think that each actor kind of leaned into their characters well. They felt believable. You felt like you were rooting for them when you were supposed to and kind of getting frustrated with them when you were supposed to. And I thought that was good, and it helps with a show that's going to be focused on these characters for quite a while, right? Yeah. That's the plan.
I agree. I thought the characters were extremely believable, and they all stayed very true to who their characters were. We didn't get any crazy deviations from like who they were at the beginning to who they were at the end. If anything, they all kind of, I would say 90% of them all grew as the show went forward. Obviously, we'll probably talk about one in particular that didn't grow, but for the most part, for the cast that they had, the wide scope of characters that they had, they all did a pretty good job of growing and staying true to who they were.
Yeah. Absolutely. And with the greatest strength being the performances and believability of the characters, for me, I got to point out what I think was the greatest weakness, and it was the lack of focus on a main character. The main character you could probably say was Moiraine. But for the most part, they really wanted to have this ensemble cast and give everybody their equal share. And while I think that can work, I just don't know if it can work in an 8-episode season of a show, right? It's a very limited amount of screen time. It's a very wide scope of storytelling you're trying to get done in a crunched amount of time. And I feel like they tried to give everybody their fair share rather than saying like, hey, for season 1, we're going to pick a main character. We're going to develop them the most, make you care about them the most, and then we'll develop everybody else as the show goes on. That's what most shows do. You know, one of the shows that I love, right, Lost, even though it has such an ensemble cast, right? These are also network television series, so 22 episodes in a season. That first season is very much focused on Jack is the main character of that first season. And they kind of get you to like the other characters more and more as time goes by. And I think that had we focused a little bit more on Rand, have let him been the main character, it would have played out more. Because I've talked to some people about Rand, and those who hadn't read the books, by the time they got to episode 7, found out he was the dragon. They're like, I don't even like this guy, you know? Like, he's so annoying. And I feel like that is a disservice to a character who is really well liked by a lot of longtime fans.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. I think the greatest weakness was just they couldn't figure out who to focus on. It was a lack of focus at the character level. Like, they nailed the story. The story was great. It was compelling. It kept you interested. Events moved along. They really pushed the story. But when it came to just developing the characters in the sense of who should we care about and who shouldn't we really care about, you got a mixed bag. I mean, like you said earlier, we kind of had a whole episode devoted to a side character that eventually kills themselves, and then like it's just never talked about again. And so you get these weird deviations at times where if you, like you said, if you haven't read the book and you didn't really know what was going on, you would think some of these side characters were important. And then all of a sudden they don't really show up for the last few episodes. I mean, even the Red Aes Sedai, I can't remember her name right now. Like she was in a, I mean, she's in the opening scene. Yeah, Leandrin. She's in the opening scene of the show. Like she's chasing down, Logain, and she's not really a main character.
Yeah. Why?
And so,
that was a bad opening scene. Not gonna lie.
Yeah, it's a weird opening scene because they paint this picture of like, okay, either this guy or this girl are gonna be the main characters, and now we're completely somewhere else, and we don't see them for a while. And so, you're right. The focus of the show, you couldn't figure out who was the important person in the party, and I think the gravest error that they had was with Perrin. I think Perrin was the one that they really couldn't figure out what to do with his screen time. They really kept what he was secret from the audience, or his abilities secret from the audience. And you kind of waited for a reveal. And when it didn't come, it was like, is this lazy writing, or did they forget about him? Or did they really think that it would be more powerful in the second season? Like, we'll tease him in the first one and then deliver in the second. I think at that point it's a little too late. But for me, the writers of the show, I think going into, if this is the off season right now, they're going in and they're getting into training mode here and getting ready to write the second season. I'm sure it's already written, but the thing that I would like to see them focus on is which character are we going to follow? Like, which character, 2-3 characters can we follow that the others can just surround and be supporting cast? And you're right. The first season was like them trying to figure out who is the main character and who is supporting cast, because they all can't be main characters. And when they're all main characters, there's no supporting cast, and then you get a confused audience who doesn't even like Rand, who's a great character in the book. He's a great guy in the book, and you get the, like you said, episode 7, you don't know who he is. It's like, oh, geez, like we really messed up somewhere.
And Rand is still a frustrating character in the book, but I've read the first 2.5 books at this point. Rand, you're frustrated with him in the books for all the right reasons, right? Like, legitimately, you're frustrated with him for the right reasons. But in the show, he's just kind of like that whiny, angsty type. And it doesn't really land when he's revealed as the Dragon Reborn, because I feel like the show did a good job. They make you like characters like Nynaeve, right? You like Nynaeve. She's got a tough grit about her. She's not afraid to talk back, but at the same time, like, she has legitimate care for people. And then Lan, right? We both love Lan, and you were kind of in the camp of, hey, maybe he got a little too overdeveloped early. I was all for it. He's one of my favorites, so I enjoyed it. But at the same time, like, these are characters who I feel like most audience members probably liked, and then you find out Rand is the dragon, and it's like, oh, I didn't really like that dude. And and then you are where you are. But like you mentioned, if the writers in the off season here, what is something that you would suggest? If you give one suggestion, if the show could improve going from season 1 to season 2, from your perspective, what do you think it would take to see something a little bit better next year?
I think slowing it down a little bit. I'll be honest. I think, I enjoyed the pace that they set, because you have to cover so much ground in these books. But I think taking some time and having some slower episodes and being confident in your writing and in the characters that they will carry that episode. You have extraordinary depth here in Wheel of Time. So I think you can afford to slow down a little bit and let the characters speak for themselves and let them really carry a scene without really much happening. Like, let Rand actually carry a scene, and like let it be a meaningful scene with him and another character. It doesn't have to always be this equal time. You don't have to take an episode and try and split it up between all 6 of these characters.
2 things. Would you think 2 more episodes, a 10-episode season would help. And then also, like, there were slower parts in this show, but they were slower parts that weren't part of the source material, and it was kind of the show doing their own thing. I feel like there was, at points, it felt like there was a lack of faith in the source material. Like, they felt, hey, if we're too true to it, it'll be too slow, too boring.
Yeah, I think 2 episodes probably would have helped in this first one, at least just to set the ground rules. Because, like I keep saying, you have so much to get through. I think maybe taking an episode or 2 more just to really set the world and the characters into place couldn't have hurt. I mean, it might have been a budgetary issue. I'm sure it might have been, but yeah, I think to answer your second question, either you are confident enough in the source material that you do let a scene kind of go. You slow it down, you let it go because you know it's a good scene in the book. You know people love that scene. You know that it can really carry the characters through. Or you really trust your own writing ability, which at this point, there's some cool things that they did that are definitely not source material. And then there's like stuff that is like, this is definitely superfluous. But I don't know if I am all on board for that. So I think if you're going to let the scene play out or to let the episode play out in a slower pace, I think you got to go with the source material because that's what the fans expect. That's what the people who are probably really watching your show are mostly long time fans of the series are gonna want. The reason why it stood so long and is in top 5 fantasy books of all time is because Jordan was a good writer. He was a good storyteller. He built a world that people loved. Just rely on that. Be okay with that. You don't need to make your own mark as a writer with this show. All you have to do is treat it the right way, and people are going to love you for it. And so I think having that in the forefront of your mind as you're writing the second season, I think that's what I would like to see.
Yeah, that's what I would say would be the number one improvement going forward is to take more one-to-one scenes from the book. Not because I don't think that the show needs adaptation. It does, right? It's 14 books. You need to make cuts. The whole thing can't be done into a television show. But I think you need to understand the audience of most people who are showing up, and that's longtime fans of the book, and they want to see one-to-one adaptations. They want to visually see what they read. They want to see it on the screen, and they want to be able to tell people who are watching the show, hey, this is why I loved this book, right? And they want to be able to see that. And we didn't have that many moments like that in the first season. And I wish that we would have, because I feel like a lot of people who were going to carry the momentum for this show were the hardcore fans who've read every book who want to be excited about it. And I feel like the fan base is very divided at least. Let's finish this up by saying, how excited are we going forward into season 2? Are we looking forward to it? Are we kind of a little bit burnt by the first season? What do you think, man?
On a scale of 1 to 10, I'm probably about an 8, man. I haven't had a high fantasy series that I've been excited about in a long time. And I think they did a good enough job and made the season interesting enough that I'm excited. I'm looking forward to next season. And I think what I'm really enjoying a lot right now are the weekly releases. I don't know why. I guess I've kind of missed syndicated shows where it's just weekly rather than binging it all at once and trying to remember it all. So I really enjoyed how they at least released it and got discussion going. And I think that really benefited the season. I think that if it would have all been released at one time, it would not have made a big a splash on the internet as it would have. I think the weekly 8-week release was beautiful. I want them to do that again. I'm sure they will. But I think I'm an 8 out of 10 for next season.
Okay.
And how about you?
You're an 8 out of 10. I'm going to say that I'm at the same level. I'm excited to just talk about it again, even though I would probably give season 1 an overall score of like a 6.5 out of 10. That's a pretty good score, right? I think that would be something I would recommend. But at the same time, I just had so much fun discussing it, and it's a substantive show to talk about. Even if you don't necessarily love every second of it, there is at least substance within each episode to have discussion with other people on whether you love it or hate it, which marks a decently made show, right? That, hey, there are people talking about it on both sides, people who love it and people who hate it. And that compared to the other show we're reviewing right now, Boba Fett, which doesn't give us much to talk about other than the last episode we totally smashed, the excitement of talking about it week to week, and they're being pretty substantive, 58-minute long episodes. I'm excited to get into it again, and I'm really hoping that the showrunners listen to people who are the hardcore fans of the books and really try and find a way to bring them back in, because I know a fair share of people who've kind of checked out on the show because it was like, hey, they just made so many changes, and by the time I got to the end of the first season, they weren't all that pumped about it because the changes from the source material. And I understand it's hard to please everybody, but you got to understand who your core audience is going to be, and it's probably going to be those people. So those are kind of my final thoughts there. I really enjoyed reviewing the show. Thank you guys so much for listening to this. If you want to hear more details, we literally did every episode. We have a playlist of it on our channel, and we'd love to have you there if you haven't watched them yet. But until next time, we're going to sign off and say goodbye.
See ya.